Hello everyone and welcome back to another Rise of Kingdoms video. I am RoyalMixGaming and today's video is going to be about how to make your target take more skill damage and you can just melt them away. So when we're talking skill damage, there are many different commanders nowadays in today's game in 2022 in Rise of Kingdoms that do skill damage. I would say the majority of commanders that you use today do a damage factor of some sort that do skill damage. And you know, when you're fighting in an open field with multiple marches and big murder balls with your 5 to 7 marches, you kind of want to make your target take more damage. There are multiple ways to make your target take more damage. In this video, we're going to specifically talk about skill damage because, like I was saying, most of your marches are going to do skill damage, and I would recommend most of your marches do skill damage because marches like Pakal, Attila, and some of those kind of marches don't really do skill damage. So they're not going to apply to this video or this skill or this way you fight in the open field. But if you use a lot of skill damage marches, this is going to help you out because it's going to make you melt your opponents much faster, help your allies when you're fighting in the open field, and be an ultimate team player that's going to help your marches do more damage, melt the opponent, and get the field cleared faster and more efficiently. So I have a couple of commanders that I'm going to go ahead and basically sort out that are going to basically help me out and give me the kind of commanders that I would talk about today when we're going through this. So most of the commanders I'm going to talk about today will be archers. There will be maybe one or so leadership, something like that, that's going to talk about. But most of the ones that we're going to talk about today are archer commanders that I like to use in the open field because they do a lot of damage. Not necessarily as tanky, but they do a lot of damage. So the first commander we're going to go ahead and go over is going to talk about just making the target just take more skill damage. Number one commander that most of us know is going to be Tamra. Her fourth skill basically has a 100% chance when you have it at 5. They cause the target to take 3% skill damage per turn while it stacks up, and you can get up to 15 stacks, which is up to 45% skill damage, which is on the way up to like 100% skill damage when you combine it with a couple of other skills. So this is a stacking debuff that just keeps stacking up per turn. It's going to help your allies on the open field. It's going to be like a little purple dot or a purple number that's going to go up from 1 to 15. And depending on the pairs that you use with Tamra, the more basically stacks you can get. And you want to make sure she is paired with a slow rage cycle. So commanders like Artemisia, Ramses, even Edward are commanders that have a slightly slower or impeded skill cycle. They're going to help her stack up these stacks because once she casts her active skill, it's going to remove her stacks, do some direct damage factor based on basically whatever other skills you have here from her primary, and then it's going to start over from 1 to 15 again, all the way up to 45%. It will be a little bit difficult to get 15 stacks, but with the amount of Guans on the field and things like that, you're really going to get a lot of stacks stacked up if you pair the right pairs. Like Ramses and Artemisia are probably my top 2 pairs that I would pair with because they help her stack up the stacks really quickly. And also are going to make sure that you get those stacks to stay on longer so your other marches are going to do more damage. So that's up to 45% more skill damage taken by the target. You pair that, or you're going to have in the open field with one of your other 5 marches, Boudicca. Her primary skill is going to make the target take up to 35% more skill damage. So you're going to want to make sure that Boudicca is paired and has the equipment that's going to basically help her rage cycle fire off really quickly. You're going to want to make this debuff be applied at the same time as Tamra's has like 10 to 15 stacks. So that you can get up to, let's say, 60, 70, maybe even, 60 or 70% extra skill damage on that target. And you're firing Nevsky, you're firing Scipio, you're firing all these big high skill damage marches that a target is just going to be obliterated. And especially when you have Tamra stacks, people are like, jump on that if you're paying attention, because it's a very obvious purple stack, and you want to make sure you're hitting that target because that target's just going to be obliterated if you target it efficiently. So you can pair Boudicca with YSG, Nebuchadnezzar, maybe even Artemisia, some of those kind of commanders that are going to help her out in the open field. Artemisia less so because she can silence herself. Yes, her expertise does dispel it, but there's still a chance to silence yourself, so it's a little bit not as good a pair if you want to be firing off this active skill, getting the increased skill damage on the target, and melting your opponent much faster. YSG is probably the best pair I would recommend because he has a chance to increase your rage, do more damage, and just speed up your rage cycle really quickly. Horn of Fury is also really nice, not necessary, but will help you fire your skill off most likely before some of your other marches, so you can have that applied with Tamra so that you do more damage with your secondary commanders all the way around the board. So the next commander we're going to go ahead and talk about is also going to increase your skill damage on the target depending on what you're doing. So Henry also is another archer commander that increases the skill damage taken by the target in rallies. So when you're basically rallying a structure, if you use Henry, you're going to want to use a lot of skill damage marches to swarm the target. Boudicca, maybe even a Tamra with like a Gilgamesh or Cyrus, some of those kinds of things that are going to apply a lot of debuffs on the target. They're going to make the target take just enormous amounts of skill damage, because when these debuffs are being applied, as far as I know, basically passive skills can stack with active skills, so you're getting, guaranteed like 60% skill damage taken, and then it's going to have to be tested if passive skills both stack onto the target as well, and they kind of have to trigger at the same time and things like that to make the target take a lot more skill damage. But I think if it was, we would have to test it, but I think if it tested and it worked, then you can get up to 60 to 90% skill damage on the target, maybe more, depending on what you're using on the open field and what commanders you're using. In a rally situation, Henry will help you do more damage to the target if you plan to swarm the target, which is one of the reasons I like Henry, because it's basically giving you an option to do more damage to the target so that you can swarm if you have to. Another commander that we're going to go ahead and go over that's also going to do a slightly different way of increasing the skill damage the target takes is going to be a buff. So Trajan here buffs your troops with 25% skill damage bonus up to a 30% whenever you expertise him, and increases your rage cycle too. Basically, this is going to help your rage fire off faster, fire your skills off faster, do more damage, buff your marches so they do more skill damage, which is going to make the target melt even faster as well. Some pairs for Trajan would be like Ethelfled, which pairs basically really well because it's going to imply a debuff. You can also do like Scipio, which applies like a health debuff. You can do Constantine if you wanted an extra buff. Wouldn't recommend that as well. I think either Mulan, like I was saying, for buffs also could work, and then Ethelfled for debuffs is really good, and that's what I would recommend. A slightly different way to cause the target to take even more skill damage, because you're causing your marches to just do more skill damage, which is really effective and does really well. The last commander we're going to go ahead and go over is still another archer commander that I don't really have expertise, but Gilgamesh here applies a health debuff called a blood craving debuff on the target, and it causes the target to take damage whenever the target is healing, but it also causes the target to take 15% increased skill damage. That's more skill damage on the target, which is really nice to have if you have him expertised, obviously, and it kind of has to trigger in the same way as all these other ones where they have a chance to trigger. But if you get all these buffs to start stacking on the opponent, and they all kind of stack because they're slightly different, skills. This is an expertise skill as a passive skill, and things like that. If they all could stack it somehow, you can make the target take over 60%, up to maybe even 100% skill damage extra, depending on if you're getting a buff from Trajan, 45% skill damage from Tamra, and you got another 35% from Boudicca. I mean, you're already getting up into the almost 100% skill damage range. And then if you get any other debuffs that can apply around the same time, if they can stack even more on the target, you're just going to obliterate these targets, which is really nice to have. Obviously, Gilgamesh is probably one of the lower ones on the totem pole for this, because you have to expertise him for this. Instead of having the primary skill on Boudicca as a 5-1-1-1, you got 35% skill damage from the target. You get Tamra to 5-1-1-5, you have up to 45% skill damage from the target. You get Trajan up to 5-1-1-1, 25% guaranteed skill damage bonus for your marches. That's why I think that basically, Gilgamesh here is a little bit lower on the totem pole. But if you're an archer player, most of the time you're going to have him expertise, because you do rallies and things like that. Which is why I'm kind of talking about skill damage and why you want to do a lot of skill damage to the target, because you're just going to melt the opponents, get them off the field really quickly. And this is kind of what this video is about, is just using some different pairs and different combinations of archers and a leadership commander to basically cause your target to take just enormous amounts of skill damage, so that everybody around you just obliterates them. So with pairs for Gilgamesh is like YSG, you can use Nebuchadnezzar, you can use Henry, you can use Ramses, you can use Cyrus. There's a lot of different archer pairs that you can go ahead and do. And depending on what commanders you have, obviously you can't maybe do all of these pairs. I can't do the Gilgamesh, but I can do some of the other ones that's going to help the target take more skill damage and help my team out, When you help your team out, usually it helps your team do better on the open field and makes you clear the field much faster. So I hope you guys learned something from this video, took something from it, because I know that I'm going to be using a lot of these commanders in the open field so that I can help my team do more skill damage and just melt these opponents off the field. So thank you guys for watching this video. If you learned something today, like it, subscribe if you haven't already. Hope you guys have a nice day, and I'll see you on the next one.